Welcome to Chess News number 16. Today I want to take a look at a game between Arkady Naiditsch and Vladimir Kramnik from the Sparkassen chess meeting that was very surprisingly won by Naiditsch, the German player. So he was playing the white pieces and they played a Russian opening, which is one of Kramnik's favorites. And all the more surprising that he loses in this opening. Now they played the theory moves for a long time. These are all very well known moves. And now one of the main moves is knight c6 as played. Another option is bishop d6. Castles here. Bishop e7. And now Naiditsch opts for rook e1. The most common move here, the most modern move here, is to play c4, and then after knight b4 you get this variation with bishop e2, etc, etc. And this line has been played numerous times on top level, so it really makes sense that Naiditsch is now opting for this slightly more old but also very good and solid rook e1. Now of course at the moment he is attacking the knight here on e4. And the strategic aim of white in this opening is to kick out the knight so that it loses a tempo and then try to make something of this extra tempo. Because otherwise the pawn positions are very equal and black's knight on e4 is actually sitting there very nicely. Now the main line continues. Bishop g4, which was played by Kramnik. And now c4, not only pressurizing the knight here, but also pressurizing the center. And yeah, I think it is well known that after bishop g4, that if white decides to give up the bishop for the knight here and win a pawn like that, that I believe that f7, f5 gives black a very good game here. And that has to do with the fact that he is active on the white squares here. Okay, of course white can play like that, but it is known that this gives black good play. So after bishop g4, Naiditsch opts for c4, further pressurizing the center and not yet taking anything. And now Vladimir Kramnik plays like Karpov used to do in his matches against Kasparov. He retreats now the knight. Black no longer likes all the pressure on his central pieces, and now he just retreats the knight and bolsters his d5 square here. So now knight c3 is coming, adding to the pressure here on d5. And theory now continues with bishop takes f3, which takes out the defender of this d4 pawn here. And after queen takes f3, knight d4, black is a pawn up, but at the cost of the bishop pair, and also at the cost of a hindered development. Now, queen d1 was played, which is still theory, and knight e6 is played. C takes d5, this is all theory, knight takes d5. Black is still a pawn up, but white tries to disturb now black's forces with bishop b5 check. c7, c6 is played. Now knight takes d5 is played, and in this position, note that this move is of course not possible, because that is against the rules. This pawn is pinned. And for the same reason, queen takes d5 would be a horrible blunder, of course, because white would then simply win the queen like this. So after knight takes d5, when white is temporarily a piece up, black has to recapture the piece like this on b5, c takes b5. Now white played bishop f4, just continuing his development, and knight takes f4 is also still known, and now rook takes e7. And I suppose this is one of the small advantages that white has in this line, even though it doesn't really work for him. He now steals away black's right to castle, because black now has to play king f8, but he is a pawn up. And of course this knight is now 2 times attacked, and this knight is also the defender of this rook here on e7, so white now has to solve small tactical problems. And he can do that in playing rook e5, which saves the rook and simultaneously defends the knight here on d5. And I suppose that is why this line is not played so often by the white players. Now black can grasp a very small initiative here with queen d6, you know, chasing again these white pieces. And a theory now continues with rook f5, saving the rook, and simultaneously 2 times attacking the knight, the black knight here on f4. And then after rook d8, many games have petered out into a draw like this, knight e3, exchanges here on d1, and after knight e6 this position is very drawish, but objectively best probably what white can reach here. But as you can imagine, that is not really what Naiditsch wanted. I suppose he really wanted to go for it against Kramnik. And let's face it, if you're in this position and yeah, you're not a pawn down, you can take the pawn here on b5 of course, but then after a move like b6, I suppose that there is no honor here to be attained. Okay, so after queen d6, Naiditsch did not play the theoretical rook f5, which probably would have petered out into a draw, but he played for the win, or he thought of some kind of novelty at home, with the rather dubious, to my mind, queen d2. Now why is that dubious? Because it leaves the rook en prise. Exactly. But funnily enough, at this moment, Kramnik did not play the very obvious queen takes e5. Maybe he feared a novelty by Naiditsch, or simply couldn't judge the complications arising after queen b4 check, when king e8 is forced, otherwise knight e7 with double checks and discoveries etc. would at least win black's queen, I think. Rook e1, knight e2 check, safeguarding the queen from capture, king f1, now 2 times attacking this knight here, but after rook c8, black is fine. And that has to do, of course, with the idea that if white now takes here on e2, then all of a sudden he gets this check here on c1, and black is winning. So after rook c1, it would probably be best for white to play f4 here, attacking the queen, and then we get this line of exchanges, queen d5, rook e2 check, and now, haha, very funny, not king d8 because of queen e7 checkmate, but king d7, and now white wins the queen, but let's not forget that he was already a rook down, you know, which black took on e5. So this endgame would be drawish also probably. And probably Kramnik wanted more. But you can imagine that after queen c3 check, king b8, queen g7, maybe he could have done something with his 2 rooks against the queen and his technique, you know, but I don't know. These 2 pawns are also very weak here, and I suppose it takes some time for these rook to get coordinated against some kind of attack against this pawn here or this pawn here. And in the meantime, yeah, he also has to keep safeguarding his weak pawns. So I suppose this position really would peter out into draw also. So this could explain why after the rather dubious queen d2, Kramnik did not take the rook in e5, but played knight g6. But unfortunately for Kramnik, I think that he is already in a more or less losing position by now. Because this lets go of the opportunity to take the rook, and it keeps black's king in the center here, and it also moves the knight a little bit sideways, and of course white now just simply retreated the rook here to e1, and now he can enjoy a great advantage in development. Just look at this knight. It's superbly placed in the center. It cannot be chased by any pawns because there are no more pawns here on the c and on the e file. It is also better than black's knight here on g6. But the most important factor, of course, is that white has got all his pieces handy whereas black's rooks are not playing and his king is still horribly in the center. So even though black has an extra pawn, which is sitting here on b5, you know, just being beautiful, white is virtually playing with an extra rook. But of course he still has to make it work. And maybe this is where Kramnik gambled. He thought, listen, I don't want to make a draw against this guy. I know I'm playing black, I know I'm playing the Russian, but I'm just going for it. He has to prove that he has a winning position. And you know, maybe somewhere along the line he just loses the threat. But while I'm thinking all these things, saying all these thoughts, I cannot help but think that this, if it had been the case, is also a very immature decision by Kramnik, because surely Kramnik must know what is going on in this position and that white has a significant advantage in the hands of a super grandmaster, you know, because Naiditsch is 26-65. He is really running a great risk. And we will see now how Naiditsch won this game in a very strong and mature way. Okay, now Kramnik starts to try and solve the problem of his king first and playing f6, you know, just trying to make some room here, some space for his king. But Naiditsch simply develops with his rook. Now this rook is indirectly protecting the knight on d5, so this means that the queen on d2 can go everywhere, you know, maybe it can go here or here or here or here, and as soon as it has appeared there, all kinds of discoveries are threatened, you know, with the knight, whatever. So rook 81, very strong move. And now Kramnik is facing an uphill task here. He could have played rook e8, which was probably the most tenacious, but already this leads to a very significant white advantage. Let's have a look. Rook e8. Just trying to exchange at least one pair of rooks, you know, so that this guy can do no further harm. So rook e8, king e8, but then white has a very nice combination. Check this out. Knight takes f6 check. This is not only checking, but also attacking the queen. So queen takes f6 is forced. But now white can enter here with queen d7. King f8 is forced, and after queen c8 check, king f7 and rook d7 check, knight e7 is forced, otherwise the king would be out in the open and be chased until death. But now, of course, queen takes h8 is followed. And white has achieved a significant advantage. At least after the move that Kramnik chose, after rook 81, which was king f7, Naiditsch has to be a little bit more creative than the line we saw just now. And Naiditsch is very much up to the task here. He plays queen e3. And now again threatens all kinds of nasty discoveries with a knight on d5. For instance, this one here, which would attack the rook and the queen could not really take here, because then something like rook d7 would follow and the mating attack, etc, etc. So black tries to make the most of it. He plays here rook he8. At least this counter attacks white's queen, but white can now win material with knight e7, the correct discovery. Now there followed queen takes e7, and now another discovery, queen b3 check, attacking the king, but also opening up the e-file for white's rook to attack black's queen. King f8 followed, and now rook takes e7, rook takes e7. And after queen b5, we can see that pawns are equal, but that white now has a queen against a rook and a knight here. And of course this is a winning material advantage. But how to finish off the game? Now let's look carefully at what Naiditsch is doing now, because he is conducting the game in a very beautiful strategic manner, and he's playing it out face by face, and I mean with face P H A S E. Okay, now Kramnik played rook a e8. This threatens to play rook e8, but white just simply protects against the back rank threat with g3. And now Kramnik improves his knight, King g2 is now played. White is in no hurry. He has a winning advantage. He just first needs to dislodge the black knight now. This is very instructive. Just look at what Naiditsch is going to do now. Knight c6 was played and b4. The idea of this being to move the queen out of the way of the b pawn, simultaneously pin the rook, and play b4, b5, kicking the knight, when the knight would really start to swarm around the board and have no solid home anymore. So Kramnik tries to defend against that as long as possible by playing a6. Now this of course chases the queen but also protects the b5 square. Queen b6 was now played and h6. This guy was a little bit undefended, so Kramnik just puts it on a square where it is no longer unprotected. But white has another pawn on the queen side. He now just simply plays a4. And again, at some moment he wants to play b5, attacking the knight, when the knight would just have to go somewhere where it is not stable anymore. So Kramnik decides just to move out of the way beforehand. Knight e5, he sees it coming of course. Now queen c5 was played, pinning the rook here, and still preparing b4, b5 to try and create some kind of attacking weakness here on the queen side. King g8, unpinning the rook, b5, an exchange on b5, and now knight f7, the knight really doesn't have any useful moves, and h4, taking away now the g5 square from the knight. King h8 was played, rook d2 was played, very calmly just overprotecting the second rank here, where there are two important pieces, so that rook e2 will never be a serious threat. King g8, king h3, it just seems that it's Karpov at work here. Also strengthening his king position, king h8, f4, also taking away the e5 square from black's knight, and after king g8, also h5, just clamping down on this square here, so that now this whole block of pawns has really become rigid. And slowly but surely Naiditsch is playing Kramnik into a Zugzwang position here. It seems that he can only play with his king, which he does, and some moves with his knight, maybe king h8. And now the next stage, watch this, queen f5. Attacking the d7 square and preparing for an exchange of this rook here against this rook, after which the remaining rook and knight would really be helpless. They cannot protect each other and the white queen would be dominating the position then. So the last few moves were knight d8, rook d7 preparing to exchange, and after knight e6 the beautiful centralizing queen d5, attacking the b7 pawn, but also threatening to exchange here, and then after rook takes e7, something like queen d6, which would attack both black pieces, and black would be lost. So, after queen d5, Kramnik resigned, a very remarkable result. Kudos to Naiditsch, he played a superb game. After Kramnik's mistake knight g6, he first won the exchange with very direct play. Then he exchanged into a winning ending. Then the third phase was he made black's knight life miserable and taking away all the support points. Then the fourth phase he strengthened his own pawn in king position. Fifth phase he went for the exchange of one pair of rooks. And sixth, after the centralizing queen d5, the b7 pawn is threatened and also the exchange cannot be stopped, after which rook and knight cannot protect each other anymore. Poor Kramnik, only one mistake, but a very dear one. So, we've come to the end of this video. I hope you found it entertaining and helpful. Please see you next time. Bye bye.